When I was a little girl, I remember a time, I've told this story before, I'm sure, but it came to mind as I was looking over this passage today. When I was a little girl, there was a day that I had gotten in trouble for something. I don't remember what I had done. And I know that's a shocker because, really me, sweet little me, getting in trouble for something. I know. But anyway, I had gotten in trouble for something. And my mom, I had run out the back door. She had already gotten onto me for whatever that thing was. I ran out the back door and ran up the hill, and I was headed to a neighbor's house to play. And my dad had a truck sitting back there near his shop that he did some auto body work. And I got behind the truck. I was so mad at my mom for whatever it was that she had gotten onto me about. And I got behind the truck and I leaned out from around the back of the truck, and with the meanest face I could muster, I looked back at the house where I knew Mom was in the house. And I looked and I stuck my tongue out. I stuck my tongue out at her. Just was so mad. I was so mean. And I was like, yes, I got her back for getting onto me. And I remember as I got done, I turned around and I proceeded to head up the hill to my friend's house, so proud of what I had gotten away with. And just as I was getting a couple steps down the way, I hear the voice of my mom calling from the back door, "Catherine Diane, get back down here." When Catherine Diane is used, it's not a pretty sight. But anyway, she was standing at the kitchen sink, looking out the window, and saw the whole thing take place. She called me back down there. I'm sure I got another spanking, and I'm sure I did not go to my friend's house after that. But as I was reading this passage in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, this week, it reminded me of that story. This first part did anyway. In this chapter, the Lord is taking Ezekiel to the temple, and he's allowing him to see these abominations that are taking place. Remember, we've talked about this over and over, how the children of Israel were so rebellious. And I think sometimes we sit and read our Bibles and we just kind of cross our arms and make a lot of judgments about them. How on earth could these people they're just terrible, all that God had done for them. Yeah, that old saying, when you're pointing your finger at somebody, you got three fingers pointing back at you, kind of holds true here, because there's times where we fall into this same category. And in chapter 8, we see a little bit of this going on. So he takes him to the temple and he says to him, I'm going to show you some abominations, some things that are happening. And it says, so I went into the temple and I saw there every sort of creeping thing, abominable beast, all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed all around the walls. And there stood before them 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel. And in their midst stood these particular people who had a censer in their hand. And it says, a thick cloud of incense went up. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark? These are the elders of the house of Israel. These are those guys who should be leading people. Do you see what they do in the house of the Lord in the dark? Every man in the room of his idols? For they say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. I read this passage, and of course I thought about me behind the truck. My mom couldn't see me. She's just gotten me in trouble, and I just really don't care. So in the dark, in the place where I think I can't be seen, I'm going to get her back. And that's what we do to God. What a dangerous place to be in when we feel as though we are in some place that God is not going to see what we're doing. Can I remind us all? He sees it all. He knows it all. There's nothing hidden to him. Nowhere you can go to hide. And sometimes we get tired of waiting and we feel like he's forsaken us. They said he's forsaken the land. We can feel that way in our circumstances, that he's forsaken us. Where are you, God? We don't see him moving. We don't see him working. But can I remind you that, as you all know, if you plant a seed in the ground underneath in the soil where you can't see anything, that seed is beginning to sprout, it's beginning to grow, it's beginning to change into something, when on the surface, nothing's changed. You can't see anything, but underneath things are happening. And I promise you, that's what God is doing in our lives, in our situations, if we will just wait and not go into the dark and start to seek other idols and worship other options and consider other things. Just be patient and wait on him. The next thing it says in verse 14, it went down and said, so he brought me to the door of the north gate of the Lord's house, and to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Now this is basically a picture of these women are sitting in the temple of God weeping over a false god who, the story goes, had died at some point, had been killed. Wow. A god that could be killed and never come back. Wow. They're sitting in the house of God, weeping over this other God, rather than being in the temple, weeping over the meltdown of a nation, over how far we've come, God. See my tears and have mercy on our land. No, they were weeping for a false God. How often are we guilty of being so consumed with things that really don't matter in our life? And I know we have needs, and I know we have things we need God to do. And absolutely, sometimes we find ourselves broken because we just need some things in our life for God to take care of. I'm grateful we have the right and the privilege to present those things. But can I just challenge us, when we get the scales out of balance, that we weep more because we don't have that new house, or we don't have that new car, or we don't have the newest, latest, greatest, whatever. You can't take the 25-year anniversary trip that you dreamt of taking. We weep over that more than we weep over lost souls. We weep over the things of the kingdom. Those are the things that matter. The third thing we see in verse 16, he goes on in this tour of these abominations of the temple. So he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and there, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they were worshiping the sun toward the east. These men are in the house of God, worshiping the sun. In the house of God, worshiping the world, worshiping the things outside, dreaming about what was out there rather than what God could do for them in his house. Going through the motions. I dare say we can be guilty. I get up, I get ready, I drive to church, I greet the people, I find a seat, I sit through worship. I might even act like I'm worshiping. I hold my Bible, I hear a preacher preach. All while that is going on, I'm looking outside at what the world could offer me. My body's in the house of God, but my heart is looking out there. God categorizes these things as abominations. And I fear when we find ourselves feeling so forsaken that we hide in the darkness thinking God can't see us, when we weep over things that really don't have an eternal value, when we go through the motions of trying to look like we're serving God while really we're fixated on what the world has to offer us, we become possibly an abomination to God. I mean, if those things are an abomination to him, I don't want to be guilty of doing those things. But listen, we don't have to stay there. Today, we can repent. We can say, God, I'm sorry. Lord, help me. Help my heart to break for what breaks yours. Bring things to light in my life that I'm trying to hide in the darkness. And remember that in the soil, underneath the soil, things are happening, even if you don't see it, and even if you don't feel like anything has changed.